Today I don't have to get so uppity about recording and making one of these. I just get to lay here with all of my cats just sitting on top of me. One of them is on my hips, the other is like laying across on my neck. Thankfully, the other two have taken up positions adjacent to me instead of on top of me. But ugh, got a bit more weight than usual. But you know what? I'm comfy, and this little cat here is very warm and fluffy, so I don't mind at all. But I'm very satisfied that I managed to finish as much as I could think of and all that going through with Metroid. So I'm glad that I managed to do that. And now I guess just going back to normal journals for a little bit until something else specialty comes up, I suppose. I found a nice spot for Gon's ashes. They're right over on what I call it, the highest shelf. It's the highest thing that is a shelf in my room, which my room kind of takes up 50% of. It's a very small place, so my room is kind of like 25% of the entire building. There's like I don't know exactly what they're called, but coverings that go over the windows and they have like a ledge, but I wasn't going to put his ashes on those. They're pretty thin. And I've got these cat crates stacked up, but that's not a proper shelf and things go in that. So I picked the best shelf in my room where my computer monitor is. A computer monitor with nothing hooked up to it, unfortunately. It's just a monitor. I had a Iber Power PC tower, but it died. It deleted Windows 10. I have a laptop and a desktop that both somehow lost Windows 10. And even when like I would repair, I had to restore Windows 10 multiple times to that desktop, and it broke down again. There's just something wrong with the computer itself. So all I have left is my tablet, which it can barely even run even Canva. When I use for graphic design, it'll start slowing down on Canva. It can barely even do can't open up DaVinci really to edit properly. It gets super slow. It's like, ugh. None of my computers are strong enough to really do what I need to do. Just barely. I edit these on Canva. Along with graphic design, I edit these on Canva. I draw the thumbnails on Canva. Just drop the audio in there, draw the thumbnail, and then move on. It can barely even run Canva, which is really sad. And I don't have the money to go buy a new computer or even the means to go take it to somewhere to get the desktop repaired. I don't even know if it could be. But at that job today, things are going pretty well. Slow day because of this polar vortex thing going on. Nobody was showing up, so we just left. And yeah, it's going pretty well. I learn. I only had one day of training, and I learn little other things along the way, and the dynamics of the whole situation. I saw something though that just kind of made me sad when I thought about it. Someone who it was really slow when I first got there, and then someone was like, "I'm gonna let everyone know that this place is still open," and they put up a post on Facebook, and suddenly I don't know if it was just the time. There's no way for me to prove that Facebook post drew lots of people in, but lots of people did come within the next 30 minutes to an hour, and then it died off again. But I don't know if it was just the timing, and that's when the rushes and all the regulars, especially on a day like this, or if it really was because of that Facebook post. And now I wonder what would have happened if I could have put up a post, or it was in another video I saw before as well, that this person's pet needed like a certain thing done for its health, and they didn't have the money, and they posted a thing like, please donate or support if you can, if that my poor animal blah 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 needs this thing. Well, if you would be able to donate, if you think you could support, lend. And now I'm thinking about if I could have done that for Gon when he was sick. Like a Ko-Fi, yeah, the KOFI thing, some kind of support fund, but I don't know if anyone would have even seen it, or responded, or if it would have even reached anyone, or if it would have even, I don't know. But now, just seeing that, it made me realize that, like, what if I had done that, What if I had put out a thing, like, asking, like, if you have the opportunity, if you could please, if it's in your heart to support, donate money to try and fund, Gon's ability to get IV, get his visit, to get him stabilized, and help with the medication, and at least get him stabilized long enough for us to get the medication to him, and that he still might be alive if I had at least tried that. I don't know, though. Part of me, one can imagine it working, and the other part imagines, nobody would have seen it. I don't know. There are things I tend to imagine a lot, that anything I try fails, gets ignored, or things like that. It's just what I'm used to, especially when you do a lot of job applications and either you don't get talked to, or things never work out, or when I first got left here, I attempted a lot of paths and ways to, asking, a certain person and close friend, or just like if there's anything, and just and then making all those calls to the different shelters, and nothing, just nothing after nothing after nothing, and being ignored, rejected, and paths falling apart, failing, closing. I'm just used to things. I'm used to my efforts not leading to anything, or failing, if that makes sense. And my one hope is that one place that still hasn't closed the door yet. But I don't know if anything's ever going to happen with that. Still no place I've submitted a remote job to. I mentioned this before, the only thing I can think of is making my own business, finding a way to make money on my own, being, delivering some kind of service, building something of my own, my own path, unless I can find a proper remote job. But regardless, I'm still studying and getting prepared for that driving test. I'm about halfway through that book, that driver's manual now, and I'm taking the different, like, online practice tests to see how I'll do, and I really getting a remote job would be really, really good. Here's the thing about, like, even getting more hours at the job I have, that would be fine enough, even an extra day or something like that, The problem isn't the amount of hours, it's the amount of money I'm able to make. But right now, getting a second job in a completely different location, that's not sustainable at the moment. It's counterproductive, and to getting that research done and getting through to getting a car at the moment. Once I get my hands on that, I will be super free to go around and drive anywhere. I'll be independent transportation wise. I won't have to do like a drive to work service. Because here's the thing the other person is doing. The other person is really trying to pressure me right now into filling up the week with additional job. The person also wants me to completely change my work schedule so that because the drive to work thing only works on weekdays, and that's it. And it's really annoying the person to have to, and it's not a money thing. It's just the person, it's really not a money thing. It's just the person really doesn't want to. And so they want me to even go in and change all of my work days to the week so that the drive to work program thing can take me every day, and they'll never have to drive me to the job. Not that they have to, but they that person really doesn't want to. And the thing is that those the work days I have are perfect. Like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Perfect amount of that, and then using the rest of the week to wash laundry, take care of the house. What else? Cook food for the next day, take care of my pets, search for remote work, and work my way towards getting a vehicle and a license. And here's the thing, it's not that I'm averse to going out and getting a second job, it's that I'm averse to the other person's how they're treating the situation at the moment. And this whole drive to work bus thing, I'd be perfectly fine to drive to a second building, a second job, work those additional hours if I had my own vehicle. But right now, I'm too dependent on the other person at the moment, and they're too shaky at the moment, and things are too shaky at the moment with that whole program to start risking that at the moment. That's way too risky. So, because imagine basically this is that then I have to become, without that vehicle, I have to become reliant on the drive to work thing. Hours that will constantly fluctuate, scheduling that work to ride to work thing with two different jobs, dealing with the physical aftermath, its effect on my body, and the fact that if anything goes wrong with that bus, or not bus, but like drive to work program, it is a bus, but drive to work program bus, having to be overly reliant on that, which will, and if I get released early, as is common around here, hours fluctuate a lot. So, the main thing that's bothering me is the fact that I have no independence when it comes to that, and what would happen is becoming overly dependent on quick fixes, becoming overly dependent on Band-Aids, basically. becoming way too overly dependent on band-aids and quick fixes, when just a little more time will allow me to get that independent means of travel and completely cut that out, whereas those other things are going to end up consuming the time I need in the meantime to get to that point. So soon I'm going to be able to get to that point, but I'll need like a little while longer. But the other person is really treating it as, in an anguished way, like, and I saw it today. The person tried to use a bit of manipulation to try and pressure me and like build anxiety and fear, and to start just like running around with a headless chicken kind of thing. And it's that thing where like the person acts calm enough, and then the mask starts to come off again, where the person starts saying is like, where's all that cockiness and bravado you had just a few weeks ago? Where's all that boldness? Where's your arrogance? And starts saying that to my face while driving to the job. And where's all that assuredness? Where's all that cockiness? Where's all that confidence you had? You sure talked big a few weeks ago. You said you got this. And when that person started saying that, I was like, wow, okay. So you're definitely still, you. You're still yourself. You're still, what's the word? You're still completely putting words in my mouth and changing what I had said, and all manner of things. And I said very plainly to that person, I said very plainly, I never said the words, I got this. I never said I was going to take over or do anything like that. I said I would support you and help with payments. That's all I ever said. And the person almost immediately got defensive, like, well, whether you said that or whether you said what I said you said or not, and immediately backpedaled to, immediately got defensive and backpedaled toward on their statements, because again they were trying to manipulate. Again, it's that thing where try to be that kind of personality type, that kind of narcissism tries to be superior, put down the other person. So basically, like, where's all your confidence? Where's all your courage from a few weeks ago when you were getting all haughty and all big and dishonorable and disrespectful? Again, saying all this to my face, when the person simply felt threatened because I wanted to financially contribute and help, to the point of abandonment. But yeah, I'm just thinking about that. But the person tried to frame me as being prideful and egotistical, and like, why aren't, so you're backing down now? Scared, are you? That kind of thing. And I just very straightforwardly said, like, I'm going to go through the tests and get my license and get a car. And that's when I'm going to start working on that. But until then, I'm not going to be going into any second jobs of this type at the moment. And the person like pretend agreed at first, and then started telling me that, you know, I was just afraid and like scared, and that I had no courage and things like that. And started like talking about all kinds of stuff, like I just pray to God to help me get rid of all my depression and my fear. And I'm just listening to the person talk, like, all right. And then I just start, you know, I just kind of ignore the person and just keep looking at the time till I get to work. And the other person's like, well, sometimes just because something is reasonable, you doesn't mean that it's okay, and that reasonable, you need to have courage instead of reason. And you know, doing the thing of trying to sort of knock you off your feet. And you know, if they can't actually come up with a good reason for their anxiety or what they're trying to get you to believe or say, then they'll just say like, well, being reasonable is bad anyway. You know, we'll come up with something like that, you know. No matter what you do, the person's going to be like, well, actually, that's not smart at all. That's not, and in quotes, wisdom, and we'll say all kinds of things to try and find a way to destabilize you, or get you to do what they want, manipulate things. It's you just gotta, because they'll use words or ideas that might sound like a direction, but if you look past it for more than a few seconds, you'll quickly realize that there's not much to what the person is actually saying, besides just trying to get you to do what they want you to do. Yeah. But yeah, so the next thing after that is I wrote down some of what the person said afterwards. I was able to remember enough of it to pretty much keep a note of it. But I mainly want to go through so I can process what the person said, and then later I even did what I usually do, and I had a little back and forth, and I wrote down some notes about the whole thing to try and figure out this. So the lines that I wrote down is, don't use that same dishonorableness and disrespectfulness. Don't even use body language or facial expressions. You can just get rid of that and throw that out. Where's all that cockiness and arrogance you had a few weeks ago when you told me you got this? And I wrote down, this is a lie. She immediately backpedals. And then what the person said afterwards is, I pray to God to clear all the depression and discouragement. And then the person, the main line I wanted to go through, it's not even a line, it was like a 10-minute long speech, just kind of, as usual, sort of talking at me in vague terms. So I'll read that here. And get rid of this justification and reasoning for not doing it that make complete sense in every way. Like today's weather, it wouldn't make sense for me to be out here doing this today. But you need, etc., $250 extra. So what makes sense is going to have to go to the side. I'm sorry, good sense, justification, and good reasoning, but I have a situation where I'm just going to have to be brave and bold and work extra and lose sleep. You're just going to have to do it. You just are. Yeah, it doesn't make sense, and yeah, it's not reasonable. But I gotta tell myself I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I can handle more. I can handle more things. And I can handle even more things than that. I can handle 3 things, and then I can handle 4 things. And I tell myself I can handle even more things. It's just like muscle building. It may hurt to push my body, push my emotional, psychological, mental state, but push it. Push it. Push my emotional, psychological, mental state. Push it. That's a lot of red flags just in that one sentence, in that one and that one string of text. That is a lot of red flags. So I already talked about one. It is a complete lie. A few weeks ago, you told me you got this. I never said that. Not even once. And she, or that person, continues to keep lying and saying that, I tried to usurp them on the hierarchy and kicked them out and tried to take over the throne and depose them and take all the power for myself. Yeah, that was never a thing. That never happened. Not even once. Yeah. But anyway, I wrote down some notes here. And there was something else that I wanted to talk about after all this with relation to driving. But anyway, I went through my usual back and forth where I chatted about it with, computer, and went through, made some notes, got some outside opinion analysis to really think through it. And I wrote down the biggest parts, copy pasted it. Several patterns that stand out. They invalidate your reasoning. They literally say to get rid of this justification and reasoning that make complete sense. That's a red flag. When someone tells you to ignore your own logic, they're trying to override your autonomy. Look, Monk, I don't like having to work with you any more than you do. But I need this job, okay? Sharona Fleming, certified healthcare worker, or whatever Sharona, her job was. Anyway, you know what? I'm gonna have some fun while I'm reading this out, and I'm just gonna keep doing that voice. They frame your boundaries as obstacles. You explained your situation clearly. You don't have an independent vehicle yet. You're studying for the test. You're already contributing significantly financially. Oh, yeah, yes, I should mention that. My entire paycheck is going towards covering what that person used to cover solo on this place. And it's exactly the amount of money I already said I wanted to help support. This is the amount of money I already... Again, the person really does not want teamwork at all with this. They are actively gnashing their teeth and dreading the idea that we share the payment. This is not a case of me freeloading or them having to work extra to cover the cost for everything. It's the fact that we're doing literally what I talked about, which was sharing the cost of the place and supporting each other. Keep in mind, this person is no longer having... The person's contribution has been reduced significantly. I make somewhere around like $700 a week now, and rent is about $900, $880, $900. The person now only has to contribute $250 to keep the rent on this place going, and to keep, this situation livable. Two, I've already made it clear that I intend to get more work and second job, and I'm working towards it. But need that vehicle first. Absolutely. So that I can focus that energy towards any of those tasks. So the part about but I/you need, etc., etc., I have to go out there and make an extra 250 just to cover you, that thing. It's like, no, you're really not. And I know the person is not. The person is not out there anymore having to make an extra 250. I'm saving the person now $750 plus on what they had to pay before. This is not I have to make 250 on top of what I was doing before. This is there's only $250 left to have to pay for what I was paying for before. Basically, the person is just saying, you're inconveniencing me by making me have to keep in mind that 250, that I even have anything left to have to pay. That is what the person is saying. And it's not even really about that. It's the fact that we're teamworking the cost and the bill. Like, my entire paycheck is going to that. There's nothing left for me. Everything that I'm working with is going towards that. And the person really just doesn't like the fact that we're doing that duo teamwork thing. It doesn't give them the feeling of power and authority and satisfaction that they get out of it and feel that they want from that. That really is the primary reason why they have such an issue with it, is that support thing. They just want to completely get rid of it. It's all or nothing. Like, despite the $700 relief from having to pay for that, they literally the person has only brought up, I can't believe you better not make me pay. I don't want to have to, do that. And again, I'm not forcing they're bringing this up completely on their own, just like with very apparent resentment and upsetness, and just like, what if I have to cover with fear, anger, and resentment, and it's very clear. It's like, there's something I can do about that right now. I'm not freeloading off of you or trying to get you. I'm literally sparing you $750 plus on the thing right now and working my way to being able to do the rest. But the red flags, going back to that that silly voice. They frame I already read this, but I'm going to restart from here. They frame your boundaries as obstacles. You explained the situation clearly. You don't have an independent vehicle yet. You're studying for the test. You've already contributed significantly financially. Those are reasonable adult responsibilities. Instead of acknowledging that, they treat your boundaries as something you should bulldoze through. They use moral or spiritual pressure, invoking religious language. I can do all things through Christ can be a way to make you feel guilty or inadequate if you don't push yourself specifically in the way that they want you to push yourself. That's not healthy. Your faith, if you have one, is yours, not a tool for someone else to use to get compliance. It's fading. The voice is fading. but this is the point. You practice it. They glorify self-sacrifice and suffering. The whole push your body, push your emotional, psychological, mental state, pretend nothing is wrong rhetoric is concerning. That's not resilience. That's self-neglect dressed up as heroism. Anyway, they shift their own urgency onto you. They say, They say they have a situation where you just are going to have to do something with no explanation, no actual reason, just vague. That's not a partnership or a collaboration, that's pressure. What's actually true here? The plan is reasonable and grounded, prioritizing getting a vehicle so you can realistically take on a second job, already contributing financially in a meaningful way, not refusing responsibility, just making sure get it in a way that makes sense, sequencing it so that it's sustainable, doesn't prioritize quick fixes, and makes sure that the underlying structure is stable. This is nothing about avoidance or laziness, it's simply adult planning. The person is expecting others to bend around to their needs, treat their urgency as universal urgency, minimizing others' limitations or context, using emotional intensity to override boundaries, frame disagreement as a lack of loyalty, effort, or strength. What I don't have to do: destroy my sleep, take on unsafe or unrealistic work, pretend everything is fine, ignore your own reasoning, rush into a second job without transportation, carry someone else's emotional or financial panics. I'm allowed to move at a pace that is sustainable and safe. Sorry, my kitten is sitting on my neck again and sitting on my face. Excuse me. I love you too. People who use manipulative or narcissistic communication often rely on intensity instead of clarity. It's full of big emotional language, brave, bold, push your body, pretend nothing is wrong, but light on actual specifics. What exactly do they really want you to do, when, and how? Or future goals, or how to actually sustain it, or how they intend for you to actually be able to work on something that they've already agreed with you is important. They're purposely creating a plan and not addressing how you'd be able to actually do the other thing at the same time, making sure to completely ignore any point that you bring up, or to frame it as like what I've discussed it before, making sure to frame it as like like at the TV show where it's like where they frame anybody who comes up with something reasonable or like makes a good point as like only thinking in the natural realm, but my thinking is beyond all natural understanding, and your reasonable mind just isn't going to be able to understand this. You know, that kind of thing. I've mentioned that before. But the whole, like, yeah, that's reasonable. But what I'm talking about is defies logic and reason, and goes beyond understanding. You know, that kind of. It won't make any sense to a reasonable person. You know, that kind of thing. Having the monopoly on. I know this sounds weird, and anyone who thinks in a normal, logical way couldn't possibly think of this solution, which sounds strange in the natural. You know, that kind of thing. The it's hard to explain exactly. I think like later I'll have a better way to explain it, but that's the best way I can do it right now with how I'm able to think of it. It's hard for me to explain at the moment. I'm sure there's someone else who could do a much better job. And I'll probably ask later, like, is there some way better? But this idea of a monopoly on hidden ascended knowledge, but really when you take a look at what the person is saying, it's just it's just a lot of vagaries and sort of empty statements. Anyway, It's light on specifics, yeah. It attempts to invalidate your reasoning without offering any real alternative plan. It frames your boundaries as excuses, even though your boundaries are practical and necessary. Creates a fog where you're supposed to feel pressured without having anything concrete to push back on. If you strip away the dramatic phrasing, the underlying message is basically, I want you to do what I want, even if it's unrealistic or at your expense, and I don't want to hear your reasons. Yeah. Let's see, and there's no real substance to what is being said, just vague statements talking at you. Vague statements with a commanding tone are a classic way to create pressure without accountability. It lets the other person sound deep without actually saying anything. Avoid giving concrete expectations that you could discuss, conversate with, or challenge if need be. Keep you on the defensive because you're trying to decode the meaning or what the person's even saying. Maintain emotional control of the conversation. It's like they're giving a motivational speech to an audience of one. But the speech is just designed to override boundaries. They're not being vague because they're confused. They're being vague because it keeps the focus on your supposed lack of effort instead of their unrealistic or, unreasonable, non-functional demands. If they had to say something concrete like, I want you to get a second job even though you don't have proper or consistent transportation, it would immediately sound unreasonable. So instead, it's wrapped in dramatic language about bravery, pushing limits, and ignoring logic. Yeah. Let's see. And I wanted to see it further, so I went with like a sentence by sentence thing. And get rid of this justification and reasoning for not doing it that makes complete sense in every way. Which, in other words, is stop using perfectly valid reasons. I don't want to hear them. An attempt to dismiss logic before you even speak. Like today's weather, it wouldn't make sense for me to be out here doing this today. Translation, even if something is objectively unreasonable, I think you should ignore that. Using a random analogy to normalize ignoring reality. Yeah. Blurring I and you to make their need feel like your responsibility, or their want feel like your responsibility. So what makes sense is going to have to go to the side. In other words, forget logic, do what I want anyway. A direct push to override your judgment. I'm sorry, good sense, justification, and good reasoning. In other words, your reasoning is invalid. Your reasoning is valid, but I'm choosing to ignore it. Pretending to acknowledge that it's a good idea, or logic, or a point, only to dismiss it again. But I have a situation where I'm just going to have to be brave and bold. In other words, I'm framing this as courage so you feel guilty if you don't comply. This is emotional framing, not actual problem solving. And work extra and lose sleep. In other words, I expect extreme sacrifice, and I think you should too. The person is normalizing burnout. You're just going to have to do it. You just are. In other words, I don't want to give you a choice, but I'm not going to explain myself or actually give a reason. I'm just going to vaguely state that you should just do what I want you to do. This is purely just pressure. Yeah, it doesn't make sense and it's not reasonable. And yeah, it's not reasonable. In other words, I know this is irrational, but I still expect you to comply. They admit that the request is unreasonable, but still push it. But I gotta tell myself I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. In other words, I'm using religious language to justify pushing you past things. I'm using religious language to justify pushing you past limits and to influence you. manipulative and used to override boundaries. I can handle more, I can handle more things, I can handle even more things. In other words, I'm convincing myself I can take on unlimited stress and implying you should too. This is self-talk directed at you. Yeah, this is self-talk directed at me. It's self-talk directed at you, this self-talk. Yeah. Anyway, it's like muscle building. In other words, I'm reframing overwork as growth. This is a way to make unhealthy behavior sound noble. It may hurt, push my body, push my emotional, psychological, mental state, but push it. In other words, pain and strain are acceptable, even good. This is a concerning mindset, and the person is trying to project it onto me. And just pretend that nothing is wrong and that there is no struggles and nothing is in your way. In other words, ignore reality and act like everything is fine. This is denial. It's not resilience. Pretend like you'll be done in a few seconds. In other words, minimize the difficulty so you'll force yourself to do it anyway. This is a classic pressure tactic. Downplay the cost, exaggerate the ease. Overall meaning, the message is basically, your reasons make sense, but I don't care. Ignore logic, ignore your limits, ignore circumstances, and do what I want. There's no plan, no empathy, no acknowledgement of the situation, just emotional intensity meant to override boundaries. Invalidate, rewrite reality, telling you to get rid of reasoning even though they admit it makes complete sense. Get rid of any reasoning. Acknowledge the logic, dismiss it, pressure anyway. Creates a dynamic where grounded thinking is treated as a problem. Blurring responsibility, switching between I and you in a way that makes their problem feel like your obligation. Subtle shifting of emotional and financial burdens or wants without saying it directly. Emotional intensity instead of clarity. Full of dramatic language, brave and bold, push your body, pretend nothing is wrong, lose sleep, but none of it actually says anything concrete. It's just emotional fog to overwhelm, so you stop trusting your own instincts, judgment, memories, emotions, things like that. Basically trying to make it so that you can't trust, trying to manipulate you into not being able to trust yourself. So naturally, you'll instead depend on them to interpret and make decisions and come up with ideas and do things for you. Normalizing self-harm behavior, framing exhaustion, overwork, and ignoring limits as admirable. That's not motivation, it's coercion dressed up as inspiration. Spiritual pressure, invoking religious language, can be a way to make you feel guilty or morally inferior if you don't comply. It's not faith in any sense, it's just leverage. They admit it's unreasonable but still demand it. The person literally said, the person literally said that what they were saying, yes, it doesn't make sense, yes, it's not reasonable. And then follow it with, you're just going to have to do it. A manipulation tactic called double bind pressure. I know it's impossible, but you're still responsible. Avoiding specifics on purpose. Vagueness is a tool, because if they were specific, you could address, communicate, or potentially challenge them. Instead of saying, I want you to get a second job, even though you don't have proper transportation, they bury the demand in motivational sounding nonsense. Vagueness protects them from accountability. They frame your boundaries as weakness. Your plan is logical and makes sense. Get a vehicle, then consider a second job. They frame that as justification, reasoning, and something you should ignore, and exaggerate their wants or what they perceive as an issue to try and obligate or guilt you into taking on what they want you to take on. Often manipulation often tries to make healthy boundaries look like flaws. use urgency to try and override autonomy. They talk like something catastrophic will happen if you don't act immediately, right now, in that moment. Urgency is a classic pressure tactic because it shuts down your ability to think clearly. They talk at you, not to you. This is a power move. It's not a conversation, it's a monologue meant to dominate the emotional and conversational space. You're not being invited to communicate, speak, or collaborate. You're just being told to comply. The entire message is designed to override your reasoning, blur responsibility, create guilt, manufacture urgency, pressure into self-sacrifice, avoid accountability, make their needs feel like your duty, make their needs or wants feel like your duty, and it's all wrapped in vague, motivational sounding language so that they can try and make it so you can't easily push back. Yeah. And hold on, give me just a second. I gotta check what my little kitten is doing. Okay, there you go, kid. Oh, I love you too. I love you too. Alright. Alright, and the last thing I wrote down is the style of the language isn't random. It's a tactic that uses higher wisdom language to override boundaries. Yeah, it creates a hierarchy where what they say is enlightened. Higher than logic, supernatural wisdom wouldn't make sense to you. The idea of the verses of confounding the wise and things like that. It makes disagreement look like a lack of faith or insight, framing their demand as beyond logic, divinely inspired, or of a degree that anyone with a natural sort of earthly mind, wouldn't be able to understand. It's that kind of thing. Yeah, you're not strong enough, faithful enough, wise enough, you're too limited, a way to shame and to compliance. If they frame their idea as coming from that higher place, then they don't have to justify it, explain it, don't have to consider your reality, and they don't have to compromise. It's a convenient way to avoid responsibility. It reframes valid concerns and boundaries as small-minded. Yeah. And ultimately is meant to put up the other person on a higher pedestal as being more, quote-unquote, faithful, courageous, wisdom, that kind of thing. Yeah. And as a way to try to get the person to act now, sacrifice, ignore limits. Otherwise, you're missing out on something greater or greater knowledge and wisdom, something like that. A way to silence voice. It's funny, because I write this, and this is literally what the person did. Any logical objection you raise can be dismissed as fear, doubt, lack of faith, or small thinking. And that's literally what the person did afterwards, is that they started framing everything I said as just lacking courage and being afraid and being fearful. Like, you shouldn't be afraid, and pray to the Lord to remove all that fear and depression and discouragement and things like that. Again, I don't do that voice to mock. That's just how the person talks. That is actually how the person talks. But they did start framing, like, the boundaries and how I have to set things up to make sure things are stable as, oh, you're just afraid. You're lacking faith. You're lacking courage. Don't be afraid to go out and work hard and do all that. I'm sorry this journal has been mostly that, but journals, they can be about a lot of different things, and that's kind of what today's thing is about. I know the person, well, actually, today was the last day of work for me until next time, so, but I just want to unpack all this today so I can get it out of my system and move on. And I know I'm making it public, so maybe it'll help someone else also unpack this if they have something similar or wondering about that. Because I'm trying to go through that right now. I guess that's the difference between these journals and a lot of other YouTube videos and things like that, is that I haven't got it figured out when I'm recording it. I haven't cut it down or edited it. I'm going through the process raw right now as I think through it. Yeah. Elevates their desires to a higher plane, devalues any other reasoning, uses spirituality to pressure, frames disagreement as ignorance or small-mindedness, avoids accountability, makes you feel small for having boundaries. Yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. And the thing I wanted to talk about earlier is this very strong memory I have. It's the person in a previous place where I live. Oh, hi, kitten. Hi. Oh, I love you too. Hold on. Because the person, again, they'll pretend to want something, and then the moment you actually go for it, when they realize, when you actually go for it and they realize you actually decided to try it, they immediately, like, no, actually, I never wanted you to do that. And actually, don't do that again. And this happened once when I lived in another place, and the person was constantly like, why don't you get your license? Why don't you drive? Why don't you do something with the vehicle? Why don't you such and such and such? And why don't you? And, well, do you want to go ahead and drive the thing today? Meanwhile, we're in the middle of, like, an intersection with, police about, and I don't have a license, and I've barely ever driven. But then one time, I'm in the garage, and there's something, where I live now, there is no garage, but this is in an older place that was being rented, and I'm in the garage, and I need to move the car forward an inch. I need to move the car forward an inch, and in order to grab something that was behind it. So I was like, okay. The person's always saying, like, to give it a shot, things like that, in really awkwardly dangerous situations. But I think that's because they don't even really know. Now that I look back on it, it's because the person didn't really even know what they were saying. It was all performative. They never meant it. So what matter? What did it matter? Where they said it or what situation? It was like purposely bringing it up in a situation where I would have to say no, or knowing that I would probably say no. So I turn on the car and line up the wheels, and I literally just drive the car forward 2 inches, and that's it. Turn off the car. Boom, that's it. And I go in telling the person, and this was years ago before I realized what kind of person that this person is. And I drove it forward 2 inches, turned off the car, went back in, and I was all excited. Hey, guess what I did? I managed to do the thing. And the person immediately descended into an incredibly angry, irate, uh, panic style, like a tantrum, immediate rant. Like, what do you think you're doing? You're going to destroy the car. Tell me you didn't just break everything, and like immediately started accusing me of breaking the car, of damaging the entire vehicle, of having like, how dare you? Who told you you could? Um, since when do you think it's okay? All this kind of stuff. Like descends into spirals into this incredibly just like irate rant, incredibly just angry and upset. And at the end, the person just says like, never drive. Don't you dare ever get in that car. Do me a favor. Just never get in the driver's seat. Never drive this car. Never even get in the passenger seat. Never turn it on. Never drive this vehicle. Can you do me a favor? Yeah. Can you do me a favor and just never drive? And keep in mind, this was the vehicle that got totaled a while ago. When the person was driving it, this was the car that was supposed to be mine. The title was put under my name. Even I just didn't have a license, and still didn't have and that opportunity was quite repeatedly denied to me to that degree as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's also part of what is going on now, but that was supposed to be my vehicle in the first place. The title was even put under my name. It's the one that was lost, and now I don't have even that car to drive. Anyway, yeah, so the person immediately went on a rant and started like screaming, shouting, and immediately ran to the garage like, let me see what you did. And like and basically just saying like, you don't know anything. You don't know, like and just started like going, immediately talking down like, you don't know anything. I bet you drove it right into I bet you, how the bumper's gone, isn't it? That was the first thing the person immediately said, is like, you destroyed the car, didn't you? Do we even have a car anymore? That was the first thing the person said. I remember now. Now that the memory's coming back. The person immediately just looked at me with this anger on their face and asked, please tell me we still have a car. Do we even have a car anymore? And immediately just started telling me, I bet this you didn't, and started going through, I bet these are all the things you didn't even do or look at. I bet these are all the problems you did and all the mistakes you made and all that and all this like and I wondered about that. Like, this is not normal, like, parent being nervous or things like that. It was a genuine, like, irate tantrum. And this was back then when I didn't realize who this person was. So of course I shot back and argued like, no, I didn't do any, and I got defensive. Like, no, and I checked I went through, and the person, it turned into that loop again, like what I'm talking about now. The person just descended into just vague statements of, you don't know what you're doing, you're incompetent, you're just, you don't know anything about this, completely contradicting everything the person has said before. It was all just performative, and performative just performative affirmation. It was never actually affirmation. It was just trying to make me feel good, I guess. And no, not just I guess. It was just trying to make me feel nice. But it eventually just became the person repeating the same things over and over of just like, I bet you didn't check this, I bet you didn't check that. And then I would get defensive and be like, I went through everything, I already know these lessons. And the person would go in and try to be like, I bet these are all the things you didn't, did you even do this and that, I bet you didn't even do this, and all kinds of things. And then I was like, I know, I did all those things. I literally went through over and over and over and over. And when the person, after going through several loops where I wouldn't relent and I would just keep telling the person, I went through all this, I know how to move it 2 inches. You can literally look at the car and see that there. This is the part. The person runs into the garage afterwards, sees that there is 0 damage and that it was done flawlessly and that no errors occurred, and that literally it was just a simple like slight push of the gas pedal, sees that nothing happened, and still starts saying and keeps saying, you destroyed the car, I bet what the damages, and keeps, for some reason, keeps on with the accusation of, you don't know what you're doing, what if you destroyed the car, what if we're not going to have a vehicle, what made you think you could ever do this, that kind of stuff. And I'm checking myself to see, like, was that even real? Because it feels unreal. But no, like, that is exactly what happened. Even after seeing that there was no damage, the person kept insisting on the damage. The person kept arguing around the concept of me destroying the car or damaging or totaling the front and like ruining the whole thing, being incompetent, not knowing what I'm doing, despite seeing that I did it correctly and me continually explaining the entire process, which matched up with all of the process that the person already performatively taught in the past and is screaming out. And when the person realized that they had no actual justification and that, they had no actual reason to be upset or angry, or what they were saying didn't actually line up with anything, and that the person actually did everything right, it's the biggest tell of the intention that the person, at the end of it all, just said, do me a favor, never drive this car. Never get in this driver's seat. Never get in this vehicle. And that part, more than anything, is just like, okay, so you never meant anything you said. And again, this is just me looking back on before I realized who this person is, and just me going over stuff that should have been really big clues, but I didn't know enough then. I did not know enough then to really understand what was happening. Or, what I was growing up with, and yeah. But no, it was one of those things where just like, no, I refused. It was clear to me enough that I did not apologize for it. And I just looked at the person with befuddlement, vexation, just like, what? So you went from everything you were saying before to now, in your words, saying that you want to ban me from ever driving this car. ties some amount of power and control and that hierarchy to driving the vehicle. Ties some amount of identity, apparently has identity attached to the driving or something like that. But that whole thing, now that I look back on it, that was completely ridiculous. But it was, I mean, yeah, it wasn't new. It was always there, and it still continues in its many different forms even to this day. Yeah. But it's still just swirling around in my head. I think I have a notebook where I wrote down, when it was more fresh, I wrote down just things surrounding it. But just that part, at the end where where this person, where they realize they have nothing left, and they can't, they'd have to admit that they were off about the whole, and so they just end it with, yeah, just do me a favor and never get in this car, never drive it again. Just never touch this steering wheel, never move this thing. Just wait for me to move it. That was another part. Just, if you ever want to touch this thing again, I'm going to do it. You know, never even touch this. And like other things, I don't even know what I'm going to do with you. You know, stuff like that. Trying to guilt the person and trying to frame them as like some mischievous little vermin or something like that. You know? What am I going to do with you? You know, that kind of thing. And trying to frame the person as some kind of scamp who like, you know, like equating the moment to like toilet papering someone's house or setting off bottle rockets, you know, or I don't know, painting the neighbor's pet. What am I going to do with you? You know, framing them as like, now I need to, I don't know how to fix your problem. You know, that kind of thing. It's like, okay. Retrospect. Looking back on it, it's absolutely ridiculous, and I had no idea how to properly handle it or defend myself back then. The main thing that flipped the switch for me on how I engaged this person was when not once but twice they ended up inducing me into two separate panic attacks, anxiety attacks, panic attack. I'd have to look up. I've looked up in the past what the difference is. I think anxiety attacks might be more like slow burn and over time and like build and last, whereas panic attacks are the more immediate sort of thing, which it could have been, because it really did build. I think one of them, I wonder if there's like a one that's like a combination of the two in some way. It has aspects of both. But the main thing that flipped the switch for me was when I had not one but two panic attacks in which the person just stood over my body and just looked down at me with no emotion and basically just spoke with complete inconvenience I remember very clearly the second one, and I wrote it down on that day. Just very clearly the second one. I ran over to the toilet and I was breathing down into it, and I was going through the panic attack. I couldn't move, I couldn't get up. I was just like stuck on the ground. And the person was just like, are you going to be able to finish this? Are you going to be able to finish working on this today? Are you done? Do you just need to go take a nap? Maybe you just... Why don't you just go to sleep for the rest of the day? I'll do it. And the person just standing over my body, just lying there, my hands going numb, like tightening up, everything just falling apart. Like, I can't even control my breathing, couldn't control my body, my emotional state, just everything escalating and exploding all at once. And I'm like crying, drool almost like slightly coming out of my mouth because I can't close my mouth because I just can't stop breathing, my heart beating out of my chest, my limbs tightening up, just like it's like raw anguish. And the person is just standing there staring, just asking, are you done yet? When's this going to be over? Are you going to be able to finish? Or do I just need to do it for you? And saying things like, you're not going to guilt me. That was more so on the first one than the second one. You think this will let you have power over me, the person saying that. But, no, twice it happened within the span of just like a month or two. Consecutive anxiety slash panic. I'm not even sure how to describe if it's one or the other or a mix of both, but just going that immediately just told me something is wrong here. And another time where there were just other little clues too, like one time where I was removing yard lights and the person was like standing across from me. And there was a particularly tough yard light, and I pulled it, and the ground gave, and it popped out and just like crashed right into my face. Incredibly loud crack. It felt like my nose just like, and it hurt immensely. My nose was like slightly bent. Thankfully, it didn't break, but it was incredibly painful. Like, I could barely speak because I have like, how do I describe it? Like a tightly wound facial muscles. When I talk, my whole face kind of moves. Some people, it's more independent, but when I talk, it really tugs on my nose. So I was barely able to speak. Like, pain all in my like upper mouth area because it like hit that sweet spot right where the teeth and the nose are. Just like crash incredibly hard. I like screamed out in pain. The other person looked over for a second with a really blank expression and just turned away and kept doing what they were doing. With just no response. No response whatsoever. Just completely blank. And I saw the person too. They just turned their head slightly, no expression, and just went back to what they were doing. Sorry, it's just bringing up a lot of other moments, like how self-destructive the person is, and how, like, this other situation where I had to take 15 seconds to rinse down a table and then set it out into the sun to dry, but the person kept switching up their orders and would get angry if you deviated for even a second to go it got to the point where, because that's what the person wanted from the start, but it got to the point where the person was then contradicting their own goals, because then I had taken it upon myself to try and accomplish that person's goal, but then the person couldn't use it as like a way to control the other person. So the moment basically I went out of my way to try and help the person fulfill that ultimate goal, and keep in mind the sun was going down, there wasn't much time left to put it out into the sun to dry, the person suddenly tells me to stop doing it and to not do it. And even though it would only take like 10 seconds to move it out into the area, and then immediately tells me to start doing like a bunch of other things. And this is something that person does to try and they constantly frame things as like, oh, it's only 30 seconds, it's only 10 seconds, why can't you just do it right now? Until you realize that, why can't you just do this thing I asked you to do, that I want, until you finally realize that like everything takes, I mean, not literally everything, but your tasks, their tasks, everything takes 10, 20, 30 seconds. What the person's trick is to basically say your tasks are too long, mine take no time. You know, whatever your focus is, whatever you're doing, that doesn't matter. Do my thing, it only takes 10 seconds, and then the person will essentially trap you in a loop of then telling you to go do another thing. That's another 20 seconds, and then telling you to go do another thing, and another thing, and then another thing, and then another thing, and then by the time you know it, an hour has passed, and you haven't actually accomplished any of your own responsibilities, but then the person will go and blame you and tell you that you're too slow and couldn't get anything else done. Or like, why haven't you done that yet? While completely ignoring the fact that they distracted you from everything that you had to do or your own goals in order to try and manipulate you into seeing what they wanted as being priority or more important, or more than that, doing it for them. It was after all these events that I realized that something was really off, and that I needed to do research, and that I needed to change things. And my life is healthier now than it was before. But setting boundaries and saying, this is what I do, this is what you do, these are spots where we intersect, I have to do my things, you have to do your thing, you know. Here's the proper boundary thing. You don't tell the other person they have to do their things. You tell the person, I won't do your things. I won't do them. I won't do them for you. I have to take care of my things. If I do your things, it's not out of obligation or a job or because your things are more valuable. It is because I'm taking time to have generosity and to help and to support for this moment. But I do have to prioritize what I've got to do in order to, actually get it done. I have to prioritize my tasks and responsibilities because they are important to my functioning, independence, ability to keep growing as well, and you have your own tasks. But what the person wanted instead is you do all of your own tasks and you do everything that I need to do. It doesn't matter what you're doing, what you're trying. It's not important, not as significant. It's not important or significant or worth the time, and I can take it away from you at any second. In fact, I will go out of my way to do it. And I will treat you poorly if at any moment you even imply that, or if you try to make it so that you don't do what I want you to do. And so the natural consequences. I could not get anything done. I couldn't move forward in anything. I was late for everything. Constantly stuck working on the deadline. If it was a creative task, I was so burnt out that I was working at it with like 5 in the morning after just having spent all day doing other things for her, for this person, for the other person. Spent all day doing that person's things. Never finished anything. Even lost multiple opportunities because it just, one, a lot of the work I do requires a specific mindset with enough energy. A lot of that is long editing and graphic design and illustration. You need a certain amount of energy for that. You need a certain space. At least I do. I need a safe environment where I can stop looking around for a stalking predator waiting to strike at any second and get out of survival mode and alert mode to actually allow my mind to work and to operate. So, and editing hour-long podcasts and things like that is not conducive to constantly getting interrupted, getting knocked out of the flow, at any moment being taken for hours at a time, and then the person finding ways to artificially extend that amount of time while manipulating and framing it as only a few seconds. Having someone who blatantly shows that they don't care about anything you're doing, your responsibilities, tasks, or interests, that they can never grow, that, and then telling you that it's your shortcoming or failing if you're not able to help that person, and that and that you're prioritizing having to go work on your thing, that it's your shortcoming for not being able to do all of it. Yeah. That it's your shortcoming that you can't do her tasks for her in addition to what you're... Not your shortcoming. That's the thing. Even that is self-centered. That it's not that you can't do her things and your thing. It's that you can't do her thing in addition to your thing. And that makes you mediocre, poor performance, you know, that kind of thing. And it is interesting to see just how quickly that person got out on their own. Just literally, that's the thing. This person has to... I think that's part of their delusion, part of their lie that they truly believe is that in any realism, no one can say that I forced that person out or that I took over and said, I'm the boss now, and things like that. But that's what the person keeps saying. But I think the person keeps saying that so that they had to create a belief they had to create a belief so it was justified that they could get out. The moment boundaries are being set, the moment the relationship had to shift, and priorities had to be made, and their responsibilities had to be laid with them now. And the moment that control and dominance and hierarchy was shown to just be, house of cards, the person almost immediately just was like, gone. I'm leaving. Goodbye. And so that's where we are now. And I'm just gonna continue to keep holding those boundaries and keep looking. I'll say it again. If anyone wants any help with anything, I said it this much better at the beginning of one of my Metroid videos. If anyone wants any help with anything, or I can offer skills or anything like that, I'm open, I'm free, I'm willing, if you want to discuss. All right. Well, that's it for today. I found the thing I was looking for earlier. Well, hold on. I'm gonna add this at the end. There we go. The trope you're describing. It's the classic narrative where the ordinary people rely on logic, planning, and common sense. A mysterious or eccentric character behaves unpredictably. Everyone thinks they are irrational, but later it's revealed they were operating on a higher level of intuition, insight, or destiny. You see it in characters like the wise fool, the eccentric genius, the mystic who speaks in riddles, the prophet-like figure who knows things others don't. In fiction, it works because the writer controls the outcome. The weird behavior is guaranteed to pay off later. When a person uses that style of language, vague, mystical, and dismissive of logic, they're trying to cast themselves in that role. I'm not being unreasonable, I'm operating on that higher plane you just don't understand yet, or just doesn't make sense to you who's only thinks earthly or natural minded, only looks at facts and only looks at facts and reasoning. It's a way to elevate themselves, dismiss your reasoning, make you feel smaller, limited, justify irrational demands, avoid accountability, claim special insight without having to prove anything. It's a performance of wisdom, not actual wisdom. In real life, unlike TV, there's no guaranteed payoff. There's no writer ensuring their higher thinking, in quotes, is correct. There's no supernatural insight behind the scenes. There's no plot twist where their irrational demands suddenly make sense. So when someone uses that trope in conversation, what they're really doing is positioning themselves as superior, implying you're stuck in ordinary thinking while they're on some, higher enlightened level. If they're operating on a higher level, then your practical concerns become irrelevant. You become the uninformed character who must trust the mystic, making their irrationality seem noble. Instead of admitting they're being unreasonable, they frame it as visionary. Because pressuring you to comply, because if you don't, you're the one who doesn't get it. In fiction, the higher wisdom character is written to be right. In real life, people use that trope to avoid being questioned. Your situation is grounded in reality, transportation, finances, timing, responsibilities. Their message is being grounded in theatrics. You're not dealing with a mystic genius. You're dealing with someone using mystical language to override your boundary. Yes, that is... I always worry that if I read that, someone will be like, this thing is influencing you. It's like, no, that is just true. That really is just true. And it's sad that it has to be true. And not that it has to be true. It's sad that it is true and that it matches in every single way, and that this is a pattern that's been for years, even before I started having conversations and with this and trying to sort my thoughts out. This has been the pattern. Yeah. Anyway, that's really it this time. Yeah. You're not dealing with a mystic genius, you're dealing with someone using mystical language to override your boundaries. Alright. That's it.